Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to InsideAIR, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Lisney, and in this episode, we meet one of the RAF's most inspirational leaders.
Doing the right thing, not necessarily the easy thing, is I've tried to put that at the heart of everything that I do. The danger of not being wholly inclusive and more diverse is that we have blind spots that we're not even aware of. We don't have to have things like zero tolerance policies because it's sort of self-policing. That's where we need to be.
Also, in this episode, we'll reheat a few stories just in case you missed them, and we'll be finding out who is under the hat this week.
My proudest moment has definitely got to be representing the Royal Air Force as well as the United Kingdom Armed Forces in the 2023 Rugby Football League President's Cup.
Find out who is under the hat at the end of this episode. Now, change, culture, leadership, and the benefits of a diverse environment. These are just some of the topics Air Vice-Marshal Suraya Marshall considers as she chats with InsideAIR's Flight Lieutenant Amy Casey.
So I'm Suraya Marshall. I'm an Air Vice-Marshal in the Royal Air Force, and I'm in my last week now as Air Officer Commanding Number 2 Group. So coming to the end of sort of 2.5 years in command.
Mum, it's very nice to see you again. Last time I saw you, I was on the parade square at Cranwell, and you were actually my inspecting officer with Kaz. So it's lovely to talk to you again.
Oh, it's absolutely, I'm delighted to be here.
Let's have a look at your incredible career, a bit of a brief snapshot, if you would. Can you give us an overview of your service, where you started and how you ended up here?
It was all a bit of a surprise joining the Air Force in the sense that I didn't come from a military family, had no connections to the military. I wasn't in the Air Cadets. I didn't go to a school that had CCF or anything like that. So I really knew nothing about the Royal Air Force at all until I went to the university. And actually, it was in about my second year at university, I ended up joining the University Air Squadron and started to learn about the Royal Air Force, started to learn how to fly. That was the point that my life kind of changed direction. I was dead set. I was studying law at university and dead set on being a solicitor, and then changed completely on graduation, applied to the Air Force and fortunately got in. So that's how it all started. I got in as a navigator, went through training and qualified on the Tornado. So the first sort of decade, I suppose, of my career was very much dedicated to flying. I became a qualified weapons instructor. And in fact, I was the first woman to ever qualify as a weapons instructor, which is kind of the pinnacle of the sort of flying profession, I suppose. And then after that, sort of promotion followed, and I ended up, doing a variety of different sort of staff roles in the Ministry of Defence, in sort of capability. I was a requirements manager for the Tornado for a while. And as I've then progressed through the Air Force, I've done actually a variety of different things. I've worked in the I-Star Force. I was Commandant Cranwell, which was a wonderful privilege of a job. I was MA to Vice Chief, so working for a 4-star and that massive insight into broader defence. I did a tour in what we call the Operations Directorate, so the sort of strategic level of the Ministry of Defence. So I really feel very fortunate that I've had a very varied and interesting career, sort of leading up to the point to being selected to be Air Officer Commanding Number 2 Group.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you think that flexibility that we enjoy within the RAF has contributed to your really long career?
Do you know what? I think so. I think I've realised about myself, I'm someone who gets bored quite easily. So I think, that sort of cycle of 2 or 3 year postings, doing different jobs that really present a sort of an exciting challenge, whilst it can be uncomfortable sometimes and you sort of think, oh God, am I going to be able to do this job? It's also incredibly rewarding. I never ever imagined that I would still be in the service, 30 plus years later. I've sort of ended up here, but I've done it because I've loved every single job I've done. And I've always been faced with exciting propositions of jobs and exciting challenges. So it's definitely, for me, has kept me really, really engaged. I love what I do. So I think that variety is quite unique. And actually, again, people have different careers in the Air Force. You can stay very much sort of in a sort of single pipeline for quite a long time. But actually, partly through circumstance, partly through choice, I sort of feel as if I have had a very diverse career. And I personally feel as if I've benefited from that because I've learned so much about different parts of the Air Force. And again, when I think about, what I do now as a 2-star commander with 16,000 or so people under command and the diversity of what 2 Group delivers, all of those experiences that I've gained throughout, those 30 years has really helped me, I think, be able to do this job and hopefully, do it well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's talk about your current role. As you've just said, 2-star commander, you've got thousands of troops under your charge. I mean, the responsibilities that come along with that, there's a lot there.
There is. And actually, it's been a really exciting 2.5 years. And as I sort of come to the end, I sort of reflect on what we've done. And actually, over the last 2.5 years, we have completely restructured internally the Air Force and the way that we work through the sort of air base, air wing, with the Air Mobility Force moving into 1 Group, with all of the air bases moving into 2 Group, with global enablement. We have not been through such significant internal restructuring since probably the Second World War. So to be part of that sort of journey and transformation, I think has been hugely exciting and only possible because I have amazing people and a fantastic team and fantastic leaders, throughout the whole of 2 Group who have contributed and shaped and inspired and led well to sort of end up where we are. And I think, you look at the breadth of what 2 Group delivers and the variety of its outputs and everything that it gets involved with. And, it is a huge responsibility, but actually it doesn't feel so huge because I have complete confidence in my 1-stars, my group captains, and so on and so on. That is a really sort of key aspect of being able to do a job as big as this, is having that team and complete confidence in them and empowering them, I think, to get after it in a really positive way.
Yeah, your people are extremely important to you. That much is evident from anyone that's ever worked with you. And something that we look at in the military, constantly trying to bridge the gender equality gap. In your thoughts and what you've seen over the last 30 years, are we doing enough?
Oh, that is a big question. I mean, if I reflect on the Air Force that I joined in the early 90s and where we are now, I mean, we're unrecognisable. And I think it's often easy to sort of dwell on the stuff we have yet to do. And of course, there is a lot that we have yet to do and achieve and change. But we don't often reflect on how far we've come. And I think we have come a really, really long way, which is fantastic. And I mean, you only have to look at some of the branches and professions and so on that we've got where we're almost sort of 50-50 male, female. There are other areas that are not so great. And for me personally, when I joined the Air Force as one of the first few kind of female aviators, sort of the first cadre, I suppose, it hasn't changed that much in 30 years. And I sort of feel that the aircrew branch, I'm talking very specifically, it's kind of stayed the same, which I feel disappointed in. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. But then the progress in other areas has been absolutely huge. And I think, many of the glass ceilings, many of the barriers to women joining the Air Force and progressing in the Air Force, have been removed and continue to be removed. Even things like equipment and clothing. I've been involved recently in trying to improve aircrew equipment for female aircrew to try and make it fit for purpose, because that might be a barrier to people wanting to join that branch, that profession. And we have to just keep pushing down and pursuing all of the remaining barriers, really, and all of those sort of perceptions of glass ceilings, because it is so important that we are open to everybody. We are a fully inclusive environment. We have made huge progress. There is definitely more work to be done, and we can't take our foot off the pedal.
We talk a lot about diversity and equality, and when issues are raised, I feel like things get dealt with swiftly as best as we can, because it's a big old ship to kind of turn around, isn't it? Within your 30 years, what other changes have you seen in how we're putting our best foot forward as far as directly addressing issues within diversity and equality?
So, I mean, I would say that we haven't always got it right, but I think the trend is moving in the right direction. It is so important that as an Air Force, a wholly inclusive environment so that anybody and everybody can come to work and feel valued and able to contribute. And, for me, that is really, really key. And one of the things that, we've done within 2 Group is to make every single role, every single command, wherever we possibly can, to untie it from a specific branch or profession, to make it sort of available and open to anybody to apply. Because I would observe that the real value of that diverse environment, people coming in with different experiences, different skill sets, it's just a force multiplier. I have a stronger headquarters because I have people from every single profession represented. Because if we're all too similar, if our experiences are all too similar, guess what? We tend to come up with the same solution. And it's that sort of old adage, you keep everything the same, you'll get the same outcome. And I think the danger of not being wholly inclusive and more diverse is that we have blind spots that we're not even aware of. And when that comes down to, what our purpose is as an Air Force, which is to fly and fight and ensure that we're one step ahead of our adversary, we can only do that if we can think truly diversely ourselves. It is something that we absolutely have to do. And of course, to do that, there are a number of things. We've got to eradicate unacceptable behaviours. And clearly that is a journey that we're on. But it's about cultural change at the heart of it. For me, the nirvana is that everybody can come into work, they're valued, they're able to contribute wholly. Behaviour is almost self-police. So if somebody says something that's upsetting or doesn't make someone feel that way, they can confront the individual there and then without fear of any sort of repercussions. You've got that kind of active bystander. So that actually, we don't have to have things like zero tolerance policies because it's sort of self-policing. That's where we need to be. And of course, having a team, having banter, having that camaraderie, which is at the very heart of what we are as a service at the Royal Air Force, is really, really important as well. It's going to take constant work because ultimately it's about cultural change. And of course, the challenge is if in those pockets of the Air Force where we're not as diverse as we want to be, that change is harder. There's lots of literature to sort of demonstrate that once an organisation becomes diverse, it becomes far more inclusive naturally. So we have to keep pressing on, we have to keep addressing. To me, it's about education. It's about teaching people to be more self-aware, to be more emotionally intelligent, so that they understand the impact of their behaviour and we can be truly kinds of inclusive and value everybody that comes to work.
You've mentioned there about RAF culture. What do we need to do to encourage the calling out of inappropriate behaviour, and how can we improve culture within the Royal Air Force?
Cultural change is notoriously difficult. I think it starts from good leadership. And that's not just at the top of the shop. Of course, it has to start there. It's leadership at every single level of the organisation, all the way down to AS1s and corporals. And I think everybody has a role to play in this. Yes, the tone and the sort of limits of what is allowable, what's not allowable has to be set. We've got policies, we've got everything in place to sort of make sure that happens. But actually, it's about leadership, I think, at its heart. And it's about creating a culture where people, if they are subject to unacceptable behaviours, they feel confident that they can challenge it, that they can raise their hand and flag up something that is not right without that fear of retribution or repercussion. And that's the bit that sort of saddens me, because I genuinely think as an Air Force, we do investigate everything. Whereas, you look at some of the stories that hit the press and, there is this sort of sense that perhaps we're trying to brush things under the carpet and so on and so forth. That is not an Air Force I recognise of today, and certainly in my experience as AOC, we absolutely investigate everything that is raised up to us, but not everything is raised. I understand that. And sometimes people don't feel as if they can come forward. And I think that's the bit that we need to address. And there's lots of mechanisms for that. But at the heart of it, I think it's about leadership, and it's about leadership at every level of the organisation.
I just want to touch on something that you said there about retribution and repercussion. So when you are bringing something to the forefront, a lot of troops are scared of this, and that can make it really difficult to be an active bystander, especially when we have to challenge chain of command. And if we're going to change RAF culture, as you've already said today, that has to come from leadership, and most of the leadership comes from our chain of command. So let's talk about appropriate challenge without even looking at some of the big subjects that we've tackled today. Just putting forward thoughts and suggestions and being able to have that open dialogue with the chain of command. In real terms, what does appropriate challenge look like, and why is it important?
This is so important. Often the best and the most sensible suggestions and ideas come from some of our most junior people. So creating an environment where they feel empowered to be able to raise their hands, ask the question, I think should be priority for us all. In practice, though, that's hard. If I think about when I'm out on the stations doing a town hall, there's lots of people there. Often some of the most junior people don't have the confidence to be able to put their hand up in that forum and, put themselves out there. That's a bit nerve-wracking, isn't it? And what I try and say is if you don't want to do it sort of openly, then send an email or, find a different avenue or go up through your chain of command, ask the question. So I think there are lots of different ways to challenge, and it depends on the individual and the confidence of the individual. But it's really important that there is one avenue for them to be able to challenge or to be able to raise their concerns or to, flag up a bright idea that they might have had. And again, for me, it's about that leadership at every level of the organisation. You set the tone, I think, as the commander or the station commander or the AOC or wherever, you set the tone, you set the bar. But actually trying to inculcate that all the way through the organisation so that it gets down to the grassroots levels, and giving people different avenues to challenge, I think, is key, because not everybody will be confident enough to do it, formally. And actually, the chief sets a fantastic example in this respect, going around all the stations over the last year or so. And he genuinely has asked people, if you don't feel comfortable, then email me directly. And he has received emails from every single station, which he responds to. And I mean, if the chief is doing it, then, I definitely do it, and we should all be doing it, and actually just giving people that avenue. And of course, once people get used to not being shot down or actually being listened to and, understand that their opinion is valued, that's kind of self-reinforcing in itself.
Okay. May I ask you about maybe some of the challenges that you faced when you came into the RAF to becoming one of the most senior officers in the Royal Air Force? I mean, did you experience any challenges?
I mean, of course. I mean, the Air Force that I joined, well, nothing like it is today. Political correctness did not exist. People were very rude. And but do you know what? Bizarrely, I joined the Air Force in the 90s and I kind of knew what to expect. So it didn't upset me. I never really saw it as a challenge. And I think there is one thing about the Air Force. We respect and admire people who are good at what they do. Right from the outset, I knew if I am as good as I can be, if I, when I went through flying training, when I got into a squadron, part of wanting to become a weapons instructor was because I wanted to be the very best that I could be, because actually I knew if I achieved that, then I was beyond reproach, and that's sort of the root of acceptance, I suppose. So I think professional credibility earns respect in the Royal Air Force. And I love that about the Air Force. That is true across every single profession we have. And I think that helped me to deal with the challenges that I faced throughout my career. I do think that you need to have a bit of a thick skin as well. The more senior I've got, particularly people who don't know me, people externally, they make assumptions about me. They make an assumption that I'm super ambitious, not in a positive way, but in a negative way. I get trolled on social media, because I've got my hair in a plait or something like that, and you get these sort of niggles and gripes. There is an assumption that, well, I've only got my job because you're a woman and, clearly they're trying to make a point by putting you into this, those sorts of attitudes from people often external to the Royal Air Force, not internally. And I think you have got to have a little bit of a thick skin, and you've got to be able to sort of rise above it and take it on the chin and actually turn it round to proving them wrong. No, I'm here because I deserve to be here, and I'm going to be the best I possibly can be at my job. I'm not going to let those attitudes undermine, my own sort of self-confidence, as it were. So I think, there's probably a lot in there. I don't know if you want to delve into any more of that in more detail.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's really important to hear that, because I guess sometimes, we forget that the boss is sometimes going through these things as well. And I think it's really important to have these conversations. If I may ask, when you see things like that, how do you not let it get to you in the moment? So when we're looking at our mental wellness and we're dealing with these things that are happening to us in real time, what steps do you take to make sure that you're processing and you're dealing with it?
I mean, that's a good question. I think probably, I guess there's a bit about experience and just, having that sort of thicker skin. And actually, I would say a lot of the challenges that remain perhaps in the Air Force in terms of gender are those sort of the more unconscious biases. And again, not people ever intending to upset or, but it's just, again, we're all products of our experience, aren't we? And if our experience is working in a very male-dominated environment, then that will drive a certain way of behaving. I think I find it quite funny, actually, some of it. But I also recognise that just being here, being me, being in this job is helping move the dial slightly further in the right direction. I mean, I'm a great believer in that, see it to be it. And so I take comfort in that. There is that sort of weight of responsibility that I feel in terms of championing other women and advocating for other women and helping move that dial, slightly further forward. And that's what keeps me going, I think. And it doesn't allow those sorts of attitudes or comments or those perceptions that people who don't know me may have. It's that kind of burden and weight of responsibility, I think, that keeps me going.
You've spoken about us, using our diversity as a tool to being the very best that we can be as the Royal Air Force. How do you think we can encourage more women and traditionally underserved communities to join us, to come and see what we can offer?
So that's a really good question. And I think if you look at our cadets, if you look at our university air squadrons, we have a higher percentage of women on those and girls in those two organisations than translates into then people who actually join the Air Force. Again, this is not something that we can assume will change by itself. We've got to kind of proactively go after it. Actually, it's really interesting. I've done a couple of, leadership, I've done loads of leadership talks, but to civilian organisations, to academia and so on and so forth. And I think they're genuinely surprised at the type of leadership that we encourage and teach and engender within the Royal Air Force. I think their perception of what the military is like is perhaps the military of 30, 40 years ago. So it's about trying to sort of show people what a brilliant organisation the Royal Air Force is. And I do believe that. And the opportunities and the team and the camaraderie and all of the benefit and great bits about being in the Air Force. I think we've got to try and communicate that far more effectively. There is a bit about sort of societal bias here. When people think of pilots, they still probably think of men rather than women. So there is a sort of education bit that I think is really key. But in wider society, I mean, my daughter is at a school and she was told the other day, in a class by a teacher that the military didn't have women in combat roles. If you've got teachers passing on incorrect or outdated information like that, these are the sorts of people that can influence young people making decisions about their future careers. So we've got to make sure they have the right information. There was a wonderful vignette I heard in India, actually, about this is civilian airlines, and they wanted to try and encourage more women to train as pilots in the civilian airline industry within the sort of Indian culture, very family orientated culture. So they targeted their sort of advertising campaign at the parents and the grandparents to try and demonstrate to them what a wonderful career this was, for their children and their daughters. And actually it was so successful. I think India's got one of the highest percentage of female airline pilots. When I talk about sort of societal bias, this is where I think we need to start educating, influencing, providing information, a bit like we do with youth and STEM, to be honest. We try and engender a love of all things science, technology, sort of engineering, mathematics, and so on in young people, in the hope that they will pick engineering and scientific subjects as they progress through their education. There's almost, I think, a bit there that we need to do about kind of gender as well, and really opening the doors on what we have to offer as an Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got some brilliant STEM ambassadors within our ranks, haven't we? Going out and about and talking about the opportunities within STEM and then within the Royal Air Force. I mean, do you think that we need to be doing more to actually reach out into these communities, actually be visible? I mean, like you've already said, see it to be it.
Well, I do. I really do. And we know, not just in the Air Force, but across all of the armed forces, that there is retention concerns. And actually, that's mirrored across many militaries around the world. So again, the only way we can try and encourage people to join is to get out into those communities, to, myth bust some of the preconceived ideas that are out there, try and demonstrate to them the richness of the career and the opportunities and the training and all of the really positive things that we have to offer. We need to do more and more of that and work as hard as we can to get the outcomes that we want.
Absolutely. Mum, let me ask you this. Over your 30 plus years in the Royal Air Force, what's the best piece of advice, something that has served you very well in your career?
So I think very early on in my career, someone said, treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. Do you know what goes around comes around in the military particularly? One day you're the student, the next day you're the instructor, one day you're the junior person, the next day you're the boss. If you always treat people in the way that you yourself would like to be treated, I think that was probably the best piece of advice that I got, because you never quite know what the future holds in store. I'd say that is a great piece of advice, and it's certainly something when I was Commandant Cranwell that I used to say to the young officers commencing on their career. And actually, again, if you want to talk about being a really inclusive environment, an environment that really values its people, at its heart is that, isn't it? Treating others in the way that you would want to be treated yourself, with that kind of respect. A piece of advice that I had articulated to me, actually far more recently, but to be honest, it was probably something that I tried to do, but I never heard it say quite so well, was do the right thing, not the easy thing. Certainly as I've got more senior, as I've had more responsibility, then, doing the right thing, not necessarily the easy thing, is I've tried to put that at the heart of everything that I do.
For people listening to us, what message about your time and experiences in the RAF do you want them to take away from this chat?
Sometimes, especially when you read the press, and it's easy to dwell on the negatives. When I'm out and about on the stations doing town halls, there are undoubtedly a lot of challenges out there. But there are also so many positives. As I say, over 30 years, I have loved every single job that I have done. Being AOC and coming to the end of my time, I've been daily and blown away by the brilliance and caliber of our people, that team spirit and the willingness I see every single day to sort of go above and beyond for each other. And I think at its heart, that is what being in the Air Force and serving is all about. I could not have wanted a more satisfying and exciting and challenging, in all the positive ways, career. And even when things have been challenging in a negative way, I think being able to turn that into something that I can learn and something that is positive and something that I can try and correct going forward, I think is really key. We are in a really dangerous and precarious kind of moment in time, I think. So really, what we do is so important. Really, really important. Flying and fighting is what the Air Force is about. And actually, as the Chief says, it has ever been more important, sort of in our lifetime anyway, than it is now. And I take great pride in that. And I think it's something very, very worthwhile.
This is Reheat for Inside Air, where we take a look at some of the RAF stories you might have missed. I'm AS Swan Kerwin. The first cohorts of Ukrainian pilots have been told how to fly the F-16 fighter jets by the Royal Air Force. A group of 6 students received the training as part of the UK's commitment to supporting Ukraine defend its skies as Russia's invasion continues. The RAF started flying and English language training in August. Personnel from the RAF have been in Australia familiarising themselves with the E-7 Wedgetail early warning and control aircraft. They found out about its operations, maintenance and support facilities in the country. The RAF has bought 3 Wedgetails. They're currently being modified and the first one's expected to be introduced later this year. The names of 13 veterans from 12 countries have been added to the Normandy Memorial Wall in Portsmouth ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day in June. They've been added to it in recognition of the relationships which the UK made during the Second World War. The Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, says we must never forget the sacrifices made during D-Day and the courage of the veterans of Normandy. A Royal Air Force pilot's completed 3,000 hours on the Atlas transport aircraft by flying it through the low-level Mach Loop in Wales. Flight Lieutenant Jackson was part of the crews from 30 Squadron based at RAF Bryce Norton, who recently conducted low-level training across the UK in the Atlas. And a 102-year-old RAF veteran has become Britain's oldest Spitfire pilot. Jack Hemmings took off from Biggin Hill in one of its Heritage Hangars Spitfires for a special charity flight. It was to celebrate the former squadron leader, his service during World War II, and the charity he co-founded in 1948, called Mission Aviation Fellowship. That's Reheat for Inside Air.
I'm AS1 Ben Russell, and this is Under the Hat, where we get to know an aviator in less than a minute. Name you're known by.
Hello, I am AS1 Grace Horton-Burnett.
What's your profession?
I am a cyberspace communications specialist based at RAF Lehman.
What's the best thing about your job?
What I love about my job is that I get to talk to many different people from across the RAF on a daily basis, and I think that this expands my knowledge on current exercise and operations as well as previous ones.
Hardest part of your job?
I do think that my job can be difficult sometimes, as plenty of initiative is needed due to the large variety of tasks that come my way.
Best location you've served?
Although I have not been in the RAF for a massive amount of time, I have been all over the country with the RAF Rugby League team, as well as plans for future trips abroad currently in the making.
And what's your proudest moment in the RAF?
My proudest moment has definitely got to be representing the Royal Air Force as well as the United Kingdom Armed Forces in the 2023 Rugby Football League President's Cup.
Thank you, AS1 Grace Horton-Burnett, for helping us tackle another episode of Under the Hat.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.